Hey there, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy days for this important webinar on a topic that I think is very and one that a lot of providers actually struggle with. And today, as everybody settles in here, we're going to talk about how to improve your PI cases and get more attorney referrals without changing the way you practice, even if you've tried to do this before without success. Now, can we really do that? Is that something that's even possible? I know a lot of providers have struggled with their marketing and their marketability and have approached attorneys to try and get referrals and just don't kind of get the results that they think that they should be getting or get any traction with their business relationship. So we have a panel of great experts here today to help guide you through this process and give you some insight that you can take right back to your cases immediately. And we're going to introduce them in just a second. But before we get going, what I want to do is over on the right-hand side, there's a gray questions box. And if you can do me a favor, I just want to make sure that we're coming through loud and clear. In that questions box, obviously, during the course of today's presentation, go ahead and type in any questions that you may have. But for right now, if you can just put in a yes or okay or I hear you, just to make sure that we're getting through to everybody, I would appreciate that. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. Excellent, excellent. Looks like we're coming through nice and clear. Perfect, awesome, thank you. Now, as I mentioned, today we do have a great panel here to guide you on this very important topic. And my name is Scott Tauber. I'm going to be your host for the webinar. I'll introduce myself a little bit later. We have Dr. Anthony Piri, and we also have Dr. Servam Patel. And they're going to give you tremendous insight into this topic of improving your cases and getting referrals from attorneys, even if you've tried this method before. So let's go ahead and get going with today's presentation. Now, the single most important thing that we're going to cover today is how to improve your marketability through case management decisions. Now, is that even possible? Can you improve marketability without like spending a dime, without having to go out there and run Google ads and do billboards and TV, which I know is totally cost prohibitive for the average provider? But can you actually get more patients, improve your marketability through what you do in your own four walls, the decisions that you make in your offices? And while you're doing it, guess what you're also doing? You're improving your patient care and the case outcomes. That is absolutely possible, and it happens every day. More PI referrals through your actions and your procedures. But like anything else, you have to know exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and why you should be doing it. Now, everybody knows that if you want more PI referrals, one way to do it is through PI attorneys. They're an incredible source of PI referrals. And also, if you want to establish longer business and more profitable business relationships, you have to improve your case management decisions. Now, a lot of providers think that, well, documentation is the most important aspect of PI cases. And don't get me wrong, it absolutely is important. But in my view, arguably, the most important aspect of any PI case is case management. And there's a couple of different possibilities underneath the umbrella of case management. And we'll talk about some of those, and then we'll bring on our experts to help us kind of tie it all together. We're also going to show you some examples of this during the presentation, and especially at the end, how all of this can significantly impact your cases. So what is case management? Well, it's your treatment first, right? First, it's your treatment and any other procedures that you may do in your office. Maybe you have imaging, maybe you have some other evaluation methods in your office. Maybe you do therapy, maybe you have a special modality, whatever the case is in your particular office. That is totally under your control, what you do. But it's also your decisions and your choices If you decide, for example, I'm just going to throw this out here, to do an MRI or don't do an MRI, that's an important decision. That's a choice that you make as a provider to do that. And a lot of you that are on here today are what I like to call primary portal providers. Say that 3 times fast, primary portal providers, not necessarily PCPs, but when it comes to PI, those are typically chiropractors, maybe DOs, and maybe family provider medicines, nurse practitioners. Those are the primary portal providers. Your decisions are critical to the entire case. And when you don't do something, as it says there on the screen, that's also a decision, right? When you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, right? Remember that song from Rush? Well, that is totally apropos in your PI cases. What you don't do, whether you don't do an MRI, whether you don't send to an orthopedist or pain management or a primary care physician, those are clearly decisions that you make that affect the case. So both in your office and outside your office, your clinical decisions are extremely important. You basically drive the case. Now, under the umbrella of case management is this other thing called co-management. And co-management, let's think about that as integrative care. You're working with others as a team. Here's an example. If you're a chiropractor, well, maybe you're working with a PCP, a family provider. Maybe you're working with a pain management specialist or an ortho or a neuropsych or any other medical provider. And that's considered multidisciplinary care. The what, the when, the why, and the how. You have to know when to go ahead and do these types of consults and or referrals. First of all, let me say that in personal injury, co-management, if we think case management is really important, under the different things that you can consider under the umbrella of case management, co-management would be, in my view, the most important thing that you can do. And we'll show you an example of this in just a second. So case management, your decisions, extremely important. Co-management, working well with others, integrating care is extremely important. And when providers don't or miss this particular aspect of their cases, I can share with you from experience of working with providers every day that this significantly impacts your marketability. If you're out there marketing to PI attorneys and you cannot do this and do this consistently, you might want to kind of pull back the reins on your marketing and kind of get this part of your PI practice under control before going out there again. You're just not going to get the results. And if you've experienced that and you're not getting the results that you think you should, and everybody has these meetings and everybody's out there soliciting attorneys, and you think the meeting went great and then nothing ever happens, well, there's a specific reason for that. You're not talking what the attorney wants to hear. And this is all about improving your cases and getting more referrals, right? That's the whole topic of today's presentation. So here are some opportunities for co-management. Patient has radicular pain or weakness. Well, where is that radicular pain? What is that weakness? What are you going to do? Now, listen, I'm a chiropractor. I practiced for a very long time. I treated PI. It was a significant part of my practice. You're probably thinking the same thing I did, is like, you know what? I can treat that. Why do I need to get an MRI? Why do I need to refer to an ortho? Why do I need to refer to a medical provider? This is something that will probably be helped with my manipulations and my modalities in my office. And you're absolutely right. Doesn't mean that you can't treat it, but you're going to want to take a look at where is the pain generator for this radicular pain and weakness. Anxiety and depression, these very often occur with TBI patients. Anxiety and depression. What's your treatment in your office for that? Very few of us have any treatment. So where are we taking that patient? Well, co-management may fall under the umbrella of a neuropsych or a neurologist. Ongoing neuromusculoskeletal pain. We've all had those patients that they get better and maybe they plateau, or maybe they just don't respond to what we're doing. And here's another co-management opportunity. You don't want to, what I like to call, become a victim of your patient's case. That is not what you want to do. By continuing to treat somebody with ongoing neuromusculoskeletal pain and not showing functional improvement or showing improvement at all, and just keep hoping that maybe that next visit, visit number 75 is the one that's going to do it. Oh, it didn't. Okay. Visit number 76 is going to be the one that one didn't do it either. And so the further you go on the spectrum of healing and with these cases to weeks to months, you become a victim. I'll show you a very specific example of that in just a minute. And another opportunity is for advanced imaging. Your patients have disc issues. Your patients have tears. Your patients have things that you can't see on an examination or on an X-ray, even a digital X-ray. And we need to consider advanced imaging. Part of our job is to capture these injuries so they can be used by attorneys that create this link back to the actual crash or the accident. That's part of our job. And what a lot of providers also don't realize, by doing this, this protects you. This is your safety net. If you think back over your career, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 25, 30 years, do you think in personal injury cases on an acute traumatically injured patient, you might have missed something, or maybe another set of eyes would have been helpful? So it protects you and it improves your cases and improves your marketability. And if you want to expand this part of your practice, co-management is an absolute must. It's something that needs to be built into your cases. Here's a few other reasons. Co-management addresses all of your patients' injuries. No one believes that one provider can actually treat and manage and do everything. The insurance carriers don't believe it. Your own patients don't believe it. The attorney doesn't believe it. Nobody believes that one provider can treat everything that a PI patient could possibly have within their own four walls. It validates injuries with others. It substantiates your treatment, and that's a big shift for providers. Wait, it substantiates my treatment? Of course. When you send to a provider and they evaluate your patient and say continue with conservative management, they've just validated your care and got the patient back to you. And of course, you don't want to be the only provider, and it prevents being the only provider scenario. When you're the only one on a PI case, who's squarely in the crosshairs of any sort of scrutiny, whether it's for the carrier or the defense attorney or a claims adjuster or in a deposition, you're the only one. You don't want to be the only one. Let's put it that way. Now, when you do work with other providers, you have to make sure of a few things. Are they open to personal injury? This is critical. You can't just send your patient back to the patient's own PCP. If you've done that, you probably didn't get the greatest report, and you may have actually lost the patient because they sent them on to physical therapy or something like that. And you can't just send them to some random provider that just happens to be close by. Maybe you're in an office building and the doctor next door is a PCP, and it's like, well, okay, I heard that I need to do co-management. They seem to be good enough and close enough. Well, that's not really going to make it successful. Do they understand personal injury? So you have to seek out these providers that are open to personal injury and understand personal injury, because you are attached to every provider and you must be careful. One provider that does something that's not quite right, and guess what? Everybody is affected, and I would hate for you to wind up in that position. So there's critical pieces and critical steps that you're going to find out here as we bring on our experts in just a second. I did want to show you this, though. This is something that's just a little bit out of bounds. This is actually fairly recent. If you look at the date up there, it's 9 of 19. And this is a $47,000 standalone chiropractic bill. And this is exactly what I talk about when I say don't be a victim of your own patient's accident. Is there any realistic expectation that this provider is, first of all, how long do you think they had to treat this patient? This is not like 3 weeks. This is not even something reasonable like 8 or 12 weeks. This is like a year or more. And what this provider is doing, first of all, they have an incredibly big bill that's going to be problematic later on. And now they have to justify, why did they treat this patient for so long without doing anything? Can you see that? Can you follow that? Can you follow that logic? So this is definitely going to be problematic. I don't want you to, now this is an extreme case. It's not the biggest one that I've standalone chiropractic that I've ever seen, but this is going to be problematic for everybody. And now the provider is a problem. And they didn't even realize it. They thought they were doing a really good job for their patient, and visit number 75 and 76 and so on. And next thing you know, time gets away from you and your months or a year, and you wind up with this outstanding bill, and everybody looks at it and it's going to have a very big problem with it. All right, so just to introduce myself, my name's Scott Tauber. As I mentioned, I'm the host. I am the COO and Director of Education at the American Institute of Personal Injury Physicians, and I'm a national speaker on personal injury. I've been invited to state association events, med legal events. We put on our own seminars and webinars. If this is the first time that you're hearing me speak, well, welcome, and thank you for being here. And as the COO of AIPIP, we work with providers every day and help them to become a PI go-to doc in their area. We help to remove the confusion that so many providers have as it relates to personal injury. Listen, none of us learn this in our professional training. It's basically street knowledge. You pick it up from the streets. Maybe you worked for somebody who did PI and you hope they knew what they were doing. But there are definitely certain things that have to be done in order to be successful in personal injury. We help improve your confidence as it relates to this part of your practice. We help accelerate your marketability and increase your PI-related revenue. I've also been featured on the covers of magazines, been published in national journals and publications. And I want you to know that the information that I'm covering and that our other experts are covering is practical, relevant, and is used by providers in practically every state around the United States every single day. The information and materials we're discussing every day by providers just like you in all of these states that you see the stars. All right, just a couple of things before we bring on our first guest is, when it comes to co-management, case management, I'd like you to think about avoiding the common excuses. Now, the patient doesn't need it. They're getting better, or it takes too long to get in, or I don't know of any providers that'll do this, or what if I do a test and it comes back negative? We need to shift that thought process, because there are available networks of providers that you can refer to that will take care of your patients that understand personal injury. So we have to get past the patient doesn't need it and it takes too long and I don't know of any. The other thing that you want to think about here is, if you don't do it and your patient still needs some form of medical care because they went back to the attorney and the attorney has to do it, that's a problem. The attorney now has to play doctor, and they didn't go to law school to play doctor. And when they do, it certainly doesn't bode well for their justifying it to the insurance carrier that, well, the treating doctor didn't do it, so I'm the attorney and my patient still had shoulder pain that wasn't being assessed and evaluated correctly, so I had to send the patient out for evaluation. That just doesn't play well. If you've ever had your patient self-release because they're just tired of telling you about their symptoms and nothing ever getting done, or you do something, but it's done, as I showed you that big bill, done after months of symptoms. That time is of the essence in personal injury, and we can't wait and see. And all of this has a direct effect on the patient's compensation, the case outcome. It can affect your reputation, and this will absolutely positively affect any sort of marketability with personal injury attorneys. And it's going to affect your bottom line as well. If you've ever been asked for reductions in your PI cases, this could be one of the reasons why. It may not be the only reason, and I'm not saying that it is, but it could be one of the reasons why you're asked for significant reductions at the end of your cases. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to bring on our first expert, and his name is Dr. Anthony Pirri, and he's the manager of hospital programs at National Health Finance. And he graduated from National University of Health Sciences in 1999 with a DC degree, and immediately went into private practice and expanded shortly after opening his first clinic. He practices in the Chicagoland area. He moved towards multidisciplinary healthcare clinics. He's opening Elite Rehab in 2006, which includes medical doctors, nurse practitioners, physical therapists, and massage therapists. And he has continued to expand, as I mentioned, throughout the Chicago area. He is continually working to help providers understand the personal injury and workers' comp landscape, which is complex, and it's great that he's doing that. And as I mentioned, he's currently serving as manager of NHF, National Health Finance. So without any further delay, I'm going to turn over the controls to Dr. Anthony. And so, Doc, if you can hear me, I'm going to give you access here in just a second. Welcome, and thank you for doing this.
No, thank you. Hopefully we hear everything. I want to try to enlarge this now, I think, right?
Yep.
Here we go.
We can hear you perfectly.
Great. So thank you for the introduction, and listening to Dr. Scott's slides and presentation, it made me think of myself when I first started to get into personal injury, kind of wishing that I had went along with somebody that knew what they were doing. I started right out of college, chiropractic school, opened my own practice. Chicago was a little unique in the fact that the commercial payers were very, very solid. So it was fairly easy to make a good living, doing that. A lot of unions, as some of the commercial payers, took to cutting our bills, we noticed that the payments were getting reduced, probably like everybody else on this call, is that they've continually reduced to the point where it became very difficult to operate a commercial practice alone. So shifted into personal injury and workers' comp without any knowledge, really nothing. And all the things that Dr. Scott said sort of hit close to me. Now, again, we expanded. So what happened to National Health Finance, how we get to National Health Finance, we expanded very rapidly. With that came crazy costs with huge numbers. I think at last count, we had seen 18,000 personal injury patients through our locations, since 2006. One of the things that I found with personal injury was that once we learned how to do it and created the networks and referred, and got referrals, we were really in a cash flow trouble, which was something I'd never experienced because the commercial pace was so great. So hence National Health Finance. So started working with National Health Finance, which is a lien funding company. Essentially what that means is that you take your personal injury case and National Health Finance will underwrite it and pay you, generally on a net 30 basis. What this did, for me, was allowed us to continue to grow. It allowed the patients to get the proper care, and it just kept the business running smoother. Now, on this topic, I didn't fund everything, and I think that actually worked out well, kind of like a blended asset. And one of the things that Dr. Scott said about attorneys not wanting to be doctors was that as a doctor, I didn't want to be a banker. And I felt that if I had treated patients, or especially in one of my clinics where it wasn't me treating patients, I had to pay for the rent, I had to pay for the secretary, pay for the malpractice, pay for the provider, pay for the face sheets, and then maybe get paid in 2 or 3 years, which was just a difficult way to run business in my view. NHF, or National Health Finance, has been around since 1999, helping attorneys and providers effectively manage cases. So again, going through this, we're experts in funding. So it's a source. It's something that is available if you need it on expansion, especially for new providers. A lot of the people that I talk to now, and I had dinner last night with an orthopod and a pain doctor, who are very sensitive to getting into personal injury, but didn't want the same thing, didn't want to build up these massive amounts of AR. And someone like Dr. Scott, I think, is important to them because there is such an intricacy between the personal injury, treating a personal injury patient versus a commercial patient or a cash patient if people do cash, cash plans. Um, NHF has treated or helped 70,000 plus victims and 330 million, and I'm sure those numbers continue to go up as we pull out of the pandemic. So we have a vast network now, 20 plus states, 3,000 contracted providers or providers that have used our services. We offer flexible funding solutions, different products. So there's basically a straight lien financing where you take your bill and you negotiate on a percentage and you're paid out. And then the nice thing with that is NHF has a group of people that follow up with attorneys that, essentially go after payment on your behalf for them, but you're out of it, which is nice. We're a publicly traded company owned by a parent company out of Australia, and fair settlement outcomes. So one of the reasons that I chose to actually be employed by National Health Finance is that a lot of people with lien companies will say, as providers will say, geez, I don't want to ruin my relationship with an attorney. NHF is very flexible on knowing that those relationships are important. So, I know if it's somebody that's working with me or one of the other, relationship experts, we will make sure that those relationships stay intact, knowing that how much effort, like Dr. Scott says, it takes to learn how to do this properly and make it a viable part of your process. The last thing we want to do is have a relationship be hurt because of us. So I think that kind of feeds to the relationship-based approach as well. Again, this was discussed, but I think treating personal injury is a great way to diversify your base. I think one of the things that makes it so attractive now is with the erosion of commercial payers, PI, whether you choose to hold the lien or fund the lien, I think could be, depending on what state, could be your top payer, if not top 3 payers for sure. So it's something that just makes sense as far as business. Lack of understanding, I think that's probably why Dr. Scott exists. It is very difficult. One of the things that I will say with having employed multiple chiropractors and physical therapists and even orthopods and medical doctors is that there is not an understanding on some of the intricacies that go with treating these patients as far as documentation, the co-management. I think it really boils down to a lot of times fear of dealing with attorneys. One of the things that I always recommend is that you should actually get to know the law that relates to these cases in your state, because one of the things that I've seen in depositions and knowing a lot of attorneys is that when they get a case, if it's a shoulder case or a spine case, they really understand medical. And a lot of times the providers don't understand legal. And you don't have to be an expert, but I think a baseline knowledge of, the legal laws in the state that you practice in is a must. And it also shows the attorney that you're serious about working on these cases. So again, the financial risk on these cases, depending on your stage of your practice, it can be something to be concerned about. And that's why we're here. Taking the roadblocks off, accepting these patients for the fear of not getting paid or not knowing how to file liens or LOPs or not understanding when negotiations come through. There is a lot of things that come down the pipeline when you're involved in these types of cases, and that sort of goes to lack of infrastructure staff that it takes to monitor these things and make sure that you are getting paid at the end of the case. And we've discussed this significantly. The reimbursement from commercial payers has eroded, and I don't think that they're going to turn that around anytime soon and start to increase payment, especially for the chiros on there. I think it's more and more difficult as they scrutinize what we do more and more. And I don't think we're the only ones singled out. I know a lot of pain doctors that the same thing is that their payments are scrutinized, yearly, monthly. Relationships with PI attorneys. One of the things that I've seen in my 20 plus years is that for the chiro practices, we used to get a lot of walk-in personal injuries. They would just come in, whether it be existing patients or patients that had nowhere else to go. You didn't really need to build relationships with attorneys if you didn't want to, because you got enough of these patients on your own where you could actually send them out. In most states, and I travel a lot for NHF, in most states now you'll see billboards, TV ads, all kinds of different things. And the attorneys have become, in my opinion, the primary access to a lot of these personal injury cases. So therefore, you want to build these relationships with attorneys. And Dr. Scott's 100% right, is that you have to be on point with documentation, with co-management, referrals. Otherwise, there's somebody else that's taking them to lunch the next day, and you're not going to be able to maintain those relationships. Okay, so difficult to, this I guess depends on what stage. If you come out now, I would imagine student loans are crazy. Starting off a practice, the cost can be crazy, so difficult to get exterior funding. So this allows you to turn this, these patients, if you can build it, turn that into money now, which I think is always good, especially at any stage of business. Really, money today to me is always a little bit better than waiting down the road and not knowing exactly what you're getting. So there's some, cost certainty with what you do. Did that. So the COVID discount effect is something that we saw a lot. So with the court systems closed, at different states, but in Illinois, our court systems were closed and nothing was getting moved through. And I believe now we're looking into 2024 to 2025 for a court date. So if a case is filed, there's no really incentive for the insurance company to start negotiating until that court date gets a little closer. So a lot of the attorneys were telling me that, it was basically a take it or leave it approach to settling. And again, that's not something that most providers, I think, are thinking about, because we're looking at filling the waiting room and filling, your exam rooms and your treatment facility with patients. So there's a lot of these outside factors that we probably don't know about, but that are definitely happening, which affect the value of your case over and above, the things like documentation and co-management. So here, looking with us, it's really simply freeing up working capital. So getting paid like most other payers pay on a timely basis. So again, it's turning this segment into your practice into something that, puts money into your bank account on the short term versus a little bit of a longer term. You could save time and money. There's definitely a lot of extra work that goes along with filing and following up, with these cases. That NHF has a team, that does that for you. And, count on guaranteed payments. So once again, as you're looking at turning something that is an asset into a real asset without having to wait. This conflict of interest also, I've only had this once. I haven't practiced for a few years now, but I did have attorneys on the defense side basically state that you were treating the patient because working on a lien, there was an incentive for you to have the case get paid, obviously, so you get paid. I don't think it's a very valid excuse. I mean, my answer to that was, well, you want to get paid for your service as well. But I mean, knowing that when you're getting into this, so having the financial partner is nice, but I think listening to Dr. Scott with the knowledge just in that short presentation that he brings, that is so important in these cases, to know what to say, when to say it, over and above the great care that you're going to give them. These are just some numbers, that we've focused on with lien financing versus holding that. Again, if you look at, today with inflation, I think you'd much rather have your money today. Again, even though I work for NHF, I think a blended asset, almost like a portfolio, selling a portion, keeping a portion, is a really smart way to go. It allows you not to, there's a time value associated with money that I think most providers forget sometimes, is that if you're paying $50 to treat a patient, and that essentially is going to be $80 when that, comes through, if you collect $100 on that visit, but you could get $70 today, which one is better? So it's kind of figuring out, and we have experts that, can help with all that and sit down and help you make the right decision on your personal injury practice. So obviously, we have a lot of providers that use this system. It can also open up providers. So when Dr. Scott said providers that maybe didn't do it, this can also open up referrals by building a network. Our team will actually approach people. So if you have a pain doctor that's across the street that doesn't want to, take personal injury cases, this may be something where we can approach them and say, well, why wouldn't you? If we offer a personal injury case that's a better payment than your commercial payer, why wouldn't you take it? Again, we've spoken greatly about establishing relationships with attorneys. I think that's a must if you're going to get into this space, unless you have an unlimited budget for pay-per-clicks or different types of advertising. The attorneys control a great percentage of these cases. And then the documentation, different things, causation, documentation. This makes me think, I remember one case that went bad. We started getting pictures of the vehicle because one of the cases we went through in a deposition, and you want to believe your patient, but there was like a $300 scratch on the bumper. So when you're in that deposition and they're like, you really think that there should have been injections and $8,000 in therapy on a $300 scratch? I mean, it's difficult to justify sometimes. So having an expert like Dr. Scott teach you sort of the things to look for and avoid is really, really helpful, because otherwise I think, the getting up and falling down in the personal injury space as a provider takes a long time to learn, and learning from your mistakes in 2022 can get very expensive. So in 2003 or 2004, you had the commercial payers that could probably bail out for the guys like us that took a little longer to learn how to do this correctly. This is simply our intake form. So on our website, we have a fantastic website. We've got a fantastic team that'll answer any questions, even if it's something just for a simple call. We've got, business development managers that cover 20 plus states, and a team that'll get back to you quickly, even if it's just for questions. And this is just the context. So I think that's it. And again, thank you for having me on, and it was very, very informative.
Thank you, Doc. Yeah, that was great. Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And as Dr. Anthony was saying, when you need providers, so this is one of the big issues that I see before we bring on our next expert, is you're practicing and it's like, I don't know of anybody. Well, that's what NHF can bring to you. You need a pain management doctor. You need an orthopedic. You need a neurologist. And do you have really the time, the will, skill, and effort that needs to go out there and get into a neurologist's office and convince them that to take your PI patients? This is what NHF can bring for you, that they can set this up in your area, because that is one of the biggest obstacles when I'm working with providers. Like, yeah, this co-management thing is really great, but I don't know of anybody. And that's one of the obstacles that they can definitely help you overcome and make you more successful, and obviously more marketable as well, when you're able to do the entire process of personal injury and not just the PI component. All right. So we're going to bring on our next presenter, who's going to kind of put this together for you in a way that your patients can actually get to these appointments that they need with these providers. And Dr. Patel is a board-certified pharmacist and founder of Compliant Clients, and he uses his medical training to help identify gaps and help patients get to their treatments and be compliant with their plan of care. He ensures that all injured patients are going to have the access that they need, and also the injury-related medication they need as well, to help your patients recover from their accident. In addition, patients are able to access optimal treatment and avoid undue medical deterioration during their legal actions. And he considers himself a true advocate for PI patient litigants. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Patel. I'm going to give him control and introduce him. And so, Doc.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Servan Patel. I am the managing partner of Compliant Clients, and we already all know the theme of today. Today is about how to improve your cases and get more attorney referrals. So before we begin, I think I want you guys to understand what I hope you will take away from my portion of this presentation. It's probably going to be 2 or 3 things. One is you're going to be like, this guy talks really fast and he seems pretty energetic. That's just inherent. So I apologize. Hopefully it strikes a good note with you. But the second one is probably the most important. It's like, hey, this is a pretty cool service, and I think I can probably begin using it fairly quickly with ease. So let's get into that. So how am I going to help you and your attorneys improve your PI case outcomes? All I do, all compliant clients does, is focuses on preventing gaps in treatment. And it's not even just your appointment. It could be any medical appointment related to the injury. So don't just feel like, hey, this guy can help me with my patients coming to my chiropractic visit. If you know your patient has issues getting to any other appointment related to their injury, it is behoove of you to help them get the access they need so they make their appointments. Because just because they make your appointment but they miss somebody else's, that's going to come back and affect you due to, of course, a damage in settlement, then which is going to cause a bigger reduction request at the end of the day. So this is not just related just to your appointment. It could be anything related to the actual injury. And so again, like I said, all we do is focus on preventing gaps in treatment in two ways. We focus on transportation and pharmacy. Those are the only two things we do. And we'll get into details on both of them coming up. But let's just focus on the why. So why is it a big deal that when clients miss appointments, what really does happen? Well, apparently it does tell the defense that, hey, maybe this client wasn't in as much pain and suffering as they claim to be. Maybe their damages aren't that bad. Well, hey, they're not making all their chiropractic appointments. They're supposed to be going 3 times a week, but they're going maybe once a week. Or maybe they didn't even see a chiropractor for 2 weeks after the accident. Maybe their claim to pain and suffering and compensation is questionable now. So this is what happens when you have gaps in treatment. And juries definitely rarely award high damage amounts when they see a track record of patients not making it to their appointments on time as they should, or having a delay in making it to their appointments. So let's talk a little bit about transportation statistics. How often does it really happen? Some healthcare providers and law firms tell me, hey, I've never heard of this happening in my 20 years of practice. A lot of times they just don't know. A lot of times they're not even wondering or asking their clients, hey, are you making it to your appointments? Do you have reliable transportation? Well, just know there's statistics. This is from Uber Health. 3.6 million Americans are missing their appointments every year due to lack of reliable transportation. So it's not that rare. Additionally, from a healthcare provider standpoint, we all know if you have a patient that misses 1 or more appointments, chances are they're going to drop off being a patient altogether. So it is in everyone's best interest to make sure that all of your injured clients have reliable access to make their appointments. Otherwise, we're going to all experience attrition. So why are personal injury patients even missing their appointments? The number one reason that most people think they're missing their appointment is just because their car was in an accident and they can't use that car. A lot of times, that's not the case. A lot of times, they do have a second car at home, but that second car is being used by another family member. Maybe that other family member has to go to work. Or maybe that other family member needs to be taking care of the kids with that car. So there's no other alternate transportation at home. Finances are a big reason as to why people can't afford transportation. I live in Austin, Texas, and gas is like $5 here for like the lowest premium. Think how expensive transportation must be for clients who are injured. They're already tight on cash. They can't go to work because of their injury, and now they have to make a lot of tough decisions. Hey, do they want to put food on the plate? Do they want to pay their rent bill, or do they want to pay out of pocket for transportation, to get to and from their medical appointments? They may have to make a lot of tough decisions that may not sound tough to you and me, but it's very tough for them. And a lot of times they might have a second car at home, but literally based on where they live, they just don't want to drive that far to the clinic. And that happens in a lot of rural parts of the nation. 2 more options, or 2 more reasons. This one that's on you see on the screen, lack of public transportation, huge, at least in Texas. Texas is a very big state. It's not like, unfortunately, it's not like San Francisco, New York, or Chicago, where public transportation options are plenty. Over here, if you don't have a car, it's really hard to get around. The bus system can be unreliable, and oftentimes the bus system doesn't really take you everywhere that you need to go. And lastly, wheelchair accessible transportation. Sometimes people are injured in accidents and they have a car at home, but due to the severity or nature of their injury, they can't use their car to drive. So don't always think that your patients are missing their appointments due to just not being able to afford a Lyft or Uber. There can be a lot of other reasons, and these are just a sample of the reasons that we see on a day-to-day basis. Another question I get asked is like, hey, Dr. Patel, like I've never heard of a company like yours. That's pretty cool what you're doing. Like, how often are you guys like, really able to offer your service? Is this issue even common? So yes, there's no formal study you're going to see on PubMed, but I've been doing this for 4 years. We've done it we've handled over 2,000 cases nationwide. And if you just do a simple Google search, all the attorneys or a lot of attorneys on Google, they're posting on their own blogs saying like, hey, they're telling their clients not to miss their appointments. And here's what happens when you miss your appointments and how it's going to damage your case. So it definitely happens quite often, or at least more often than most healthcare providers and attorneys and even clients realize. Let's look beyond the dollar. So outside of damaging case outcomes, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if your patients are not making it to their medical appointments, of course their clinical outcomes are going to suffer. Of course they're going to have a delay in healing, and of course they're going to have other adverse events down the road. So it is very crucial to have transportation figured out in the cycle of your patient's care. So if transportation is figured out, and of course, if your patient has access to all types of treatment, including their injury-related medications, which we'll get to in a moment, it will really help improve their health outcome. This is a good question that I love to answer. It mostly gets asked by personal injury attorneys. As it stands right now, most personal injury attorneys I talk to, they are worried. They say like, hey, Dr. Patel, like your service sounds good, but can I build this to the case? Is this going to be a case cost? Who pays for this? Is it coming out of the attorney's settlement? Is it coming out of the doctor's portion? Is it coming out of what the patient receives? This is my answer to this. Our bills are medical bills, 100%. We only provide transportation to and from medical appointments. We don't provide transportation going to a bar or a grocery store, and our prescription insurance card, it only covers injury-related medications. So it's not going to cover their cholesterol medications. It's not going to cover their allergy medications unless for some reason that is somehow tied to the injury. I'm a pharmacist. I'm a doctor of pharmacy. I designed the formulary myself. I own multiple pharmacies in the Texas area, and we're very confident on the formula that we have created to ensure that both transportation and pharmacy both of our services are only performed when it's related to the injury. So that way, if and when we get deposed, the defense asks us, hey, are you just providing services to rack up medical charges? We're able to say, no, we only provide services related to the injury if and when the client needs our services. So let's talk a little bit about medications. A lot of people know that medication prices are definitely in the spotlight. In the US, medication prices have been rising. They're outpacing inflation. The growth is just astronomical. And so even though the majority of Americans have coverage for prescription insurance, increasingly year over year, more people are unable to afford their medications. That makes no sense, right? You would think the more coverage we have, the less this should be an issue of, but it's because since these medication prices are rising, that means whether you have insurance or not, your copays are rising, your deductibles are rising, your out-of-pocket expenses are rising before your insurance even kicks in. I paid personally for a PPO insurance, but I don't get to see a lick of that coverage until I think my family, out-of-pocket is like $8,000. So I think a lot of you can relate to this. So when you see on this screen where I'm telling you 40% of Americans can be struggling to pay for the cost of their medications, you don't know where it's coming from. 1/3 of Americans say, hey, they've actually skipped refilling a med just because of the cost of the medication. And 36% have definitely agreed that hey, yeah, my medications that I was taking last year, it's more expensive this year. 18% say it's gotten to the point where they have to make a tough choice. They have to be like, should I take my medication or should I use this money to cover rent or, put some food on the dinner table? And 42% in general have said it's become or getting somewhat difficult to pay for medications. So as you can tell, transportation and pharmacy, something that we all might take for granted and think that like, hey, this is all of our patients have it, everyone has everything covered. That's not always the case. And this graph shows you what happens when you have a car accident case and you have a client that doesn't have transportation, or at least reliable transportation, to and from their medical appointments, and they don't have access to pay for their injury-related medications. It's going to create a record of pharmacy and treatment non-compliance, and then the law firm is going to find out maybe later on, or the healthcare provider will find out later on after the delay has already occurred, and they're going to scramble and try and make things right, but by then you're mitigating what could have been or should have been prevented. And the defense is going to see this gap in care, this gap in treatment, and it's going to affect everyone. It affects everyone that's involved in the case, which is why it's crucial that whether you are the prescribing MD or not, to at least offer your clients a solution if they need pharmacy coverage, or offer them a solution if they need transportation support. I'll tell you right now, I'll put a pause right here and right now, just so you guys can at least appreciate the integrity that I'd like to hold myself and my company up to. Don't use me if your client has a ride. Don't use me if your client can afford their copays and deductibles. Of course, medication costs and pharmacy costs and transportation costs, it would of course build medical damages and help the case, but it's an unnecessary expense. You don't need me on all of your clients. You don't need me for all of your patients. You only want to use us for those select few patients that are slipping through the cracks, where they could, if they actually need transportation or pharmacy, we're more than happy to help. For everyone else who can, make their own ends meet, it's definitely going to be much more cost effective for them to do so. So when a client or when a healthcare provider or when an attorney ends up looping us in on a case, this is what the cases look like. There are no gaps in care, right? The patient gets injured today. They don't have another car at home, or liabilities undetermined. The attorney reaches out to me today, or the healthcare provider says, hey, I need to see this client today. If they don't have a ride, can you help? We get the ride scheduled today. They see you today. The doctor writes for a prescription. We give them an insurance card. They can use it at the pharmacy of their choice. Their medications are covered today. There is no gap in care. This proves that the patient was in pain and they took active efforts to get seen and to get treated, and they're being compliant with their care plan. We offer a lot of convenient and reliable options when it comes to transportation and pharmacy. So right now, this is just a picture of Lyft. They don't need the app. A lot of people are like, hey, I have clients who aren't really great with phones. Do they need an app? Do they need a mobile phone? No, they can. I mean, we can text them stuff, but a lot of times we just do things over the phone. Or we have a prescription insurance card that works literally everywhere. And we don't just do Lyft. We don't just use Uber. We do flights. We do hotels, wheelchair accessible vans. If you have a client that lives in the sticks and no one can get to them, you reach out to us, give us a couple of days, we'll figure out a company that can go and pick them up and take them to and from their medical appointments. And our prescription insurance card, it works everywhere. Walgreens, Amazon, CVS, your local grocery store. We're accepted at over 50,000 pharmacies in all 50 states. Again, this just shows we are a nationwide company. There's not a single state that we don't work in. And again, let's focus a little bit on pricing. So if you're an attorney, this never costs you anything. If you're a medical provider, this never costs you anything. We operate under a letter of protection on a non-recourse basis. So even the client, they don't pay us anything up front. We get paid if and when and only if the case settles in a favorable manner for the injured victim. And of course, if the case goes south, we write our bill off 100%. Enrolling clients. This is just for law firms. So I'll talk a little bit about if you're a healthcare provider, how do you work with this? A lot of law firms are like, hey, do I have to fill out a lot of information and upload police reports and things like that to get it approved? No. It's 3 pages, takes you 3 minutes. You don't upload a single thing. And our approval turnaround time, on fastest time, we're about 5 minutes. On the slowest time, 15 minutes. I think we're averaging somewhere around 10 minutes. So if you go to our website, click on Enroll New Client, fill out our form, we'll get you and your client taken care of in under 15 minutes. So let's go towards a recap. So scheduling, rides, and missed medical treatments. A lot of attorneys and healthcare providers, they say, hey, Dr. Patel, this sounds great. why should I have you do it? I've been scheduling rides myself, or I can pay for my clients Lyft and Uber, and we can handle it in-house just fine. To that, my answer is, well, let me ask you another way. Do you want to use your own money, and do you want to use your own employees' payroll, time, and energy focusing on these type of administrative tasks that they're not even trained to handle? This stuff is a hassle. Let's not beat around the bush. This is a very time-consuming, time-intensive hassle to be scheduling rides. Then you have to deal with the calls when patients miss their ride, and they can call you after hours. Appointments can be scheduled over the weekend. Do you really want to even have to deal with that hassle when there's a company like us where all we do is specialize in this? All we do is pharmacy and transportation, and it's under our dime. There is no cost to you. So you whether you're a healthcare provider or an attorney, you have much more important matters that you need to attend to that you're trained in. Covering medications and making sure patients get to and from their appointments doesn't need to be one of them. Be smart. Outsource it to a company that specializes in it. So let's tie it all together. You need to focus on whether it's pharmacy or transportation or anything else. Preventing gaps in your client's treatment is something that needs to be addressed and considered by all stakeholders, whether you're the healthcare provider, the attorney, a vendor, even the injured client. You can't have gaps in treatment and expect a favorable outcome. Of course, ensuring your patient or client makes it to their appointments is where we can come in handy. And whether you are talking with me or you're talking with Dr. Peer at National Health Finance or even Dr. Tauber, partner with the right people in this space. It's important. There's so many people out there. There's so many companies out there. Figure out which is a company or which is a person that reflects your values, reflects your integrity, and of course will be useful to you and your patients. And of course, you, at the end of the day, if you're a healthcare provider, you want to be a resource to your law firms. I'll tell you a little story. There was a provider, a chiropractor in East Austin. He was getting a good amount of business, but only locally. He was like, hey, Servant, I understand you're in all these states. Can you help me get more business? And I flipped it back on him. I was like, listen, tell all of the attorneys that you're already working with that you can help, you, by extension of me, can see patients all over Austin, not just East Austin, because I'm going to be scheduling the rides anyways for the clients that need it. He did that, and his patient volume referral count went up like 30%. Because all the attorneys, you know what they thought of him? They were like, oh, this guy's in East Austin. We're only going to send him clients in East Austin. They love the chiropractor. He has great rapport with the attorneys, great rapport with the patients, but they just pigeonholed him or they pinholed him in East Austin. And as soon as he was able to tell us hey, Dr. Patel over here can help schedule the rides for the clients that need to see me, now these attorneys are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I didn't even do any marketing for him. I just let him know. It's like, hey, just tell your attorneys that by extension of me, I can expand your reach. You don't have to just be seeing patients in your local area if I can't help. So I would think by now you're agreeing with me. This guy talks a lot, he's energetic. But also I hope you're also thinking hey, this seems like a pretty good service offering. Maybe we can reach out to him when we have a client in need. And that's literally all I ask for. I don't expect all of you guys to be reaching out for your phones and emailing me right now, unless you want to, of course. But these three questions might be what you're thinking right now. Hey, what change do I need to make, if anything, right now? How do I talk to this guy? And is there any information I can give to my clients if they need these services? So let's address these real quick, and then we'll wrap up. So this is my suggestion. If you're from the healthcare provider standpoint, when you guys are scheduling the appointment, it's the best time to ask. Ask your client, hey, do you need transportation to and from this appointment? Or, hey, do you have prescription insurance? And even if you have prescription insurance, are you having issues affording your copays and deductibles? If they say any answer that clues you in that they should use us, well, then you can either reach out to us, fill out our form, or we can contact that client directly. And if you are a law firm, same thing. The questions are worded a little differently, but the best time to ask is right during case intake. Don't wait for a client to miss their appointments and have these 2-3 week gaps in treatment or inconsistent compliance with the care plan before reaching out to me. You want to ask them, do you need transportation to and from your appointments? Do you have prescription insurance? And if not, or even if so, can you afford them? So I just wanted to show you a little bit of references. And then, of course, at the end of the day, if you want to learn more, just reach out to me. Reach out, book a call. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. Again, my goal is to prevent any of your injured clients from having a gap in care. And I want to be your transportation and pharmacy go-to guy when it is medically appropriate. And if you guys want some business cards or flyers in the mail, I'm more than happy to send it. Just book a call with me first, and we're more than happy to send you a little care package in the mail after we talk. And that's it. I really thank you all for your time. Thank you, Dr. Talbert, for putting together this informative webinar, and I really hope to be of service to those of you that need me in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. And for those of you that are listening, it is so important that your patients make their appointments. Otherwise, the carrier, they just don't think that the patient's taking their injury seriously. These gaps in care are case killers. It's another reason why you might be asked for reductions. Now, there's some documentation that goes along with this, but the first thing is you got to get your patients to not only your own treatments, but any other provider as well. So if you're sending them to pain management and they can't get there, or to an orthopedist, a neurologist, that's a problem. And Compliant Clients and Dr. Servam can help you overcome that. Hopefully you're kind of putting this all together in your mind and taking a lot of notes on, okay, case management, it's my decisions, it's co-management, I got to get my patients to other providers. There's a network that's available that can help me with this, and a company that can help me with it. If there's funding is an option, then there's a company that can help me, and I can really be a resource to the attorneys and get my patients the care that they need when there's transportation and pharmacy issues. I can tell you story after story, and attorneys telling me that they thought that their client was going to the doctor, and the doctor wasn't seeing their client, the patient, because of transportation issues, and never communicated, and it totally destroyed cases. So it's not a one-off. This happens every single day. The last part of today is really important, and I just want to go over a couple of things, and then we're going to have a quick open panel discussion and then some questions. And I know we're running over, so please, if you can hang with us, stick around. If you need to leave, I totally understand, as we're heading to the top of the hour and a lot of you getting back into seeing patients, but you'll get access to the recording. So the old paradigm of personal injury is really antiquated, and that's why it's called the old paradigm. It's chiropractic treatment only, and we saw that earlier. If you're not familiar, if this is a new space for you, there's a software that's used to evaluate cases. In chiropractic treatment only, these cases really have a limited and a decrease in value. They're very hard to settle for attorneys, and they usually lead to huge reduction requests. And as Dr. Anthony was talking about, now, especially with COVID, all of these cases are now, the litigation is being backed up. And he said to 2025, which is not surprising. The court system is closed down, and the carriers know this, by the way, and that's why there's a lot of lowballing going on out there. And to be honest with you, if you're a chiro-only treatment, which all the treatments within your four walls, attorneys are going to have a hard time taking these cases to court and even into the med legal process, and they're just going to ask you for a reduction. And that's just the way it is. Plus, as we mentioned earlier, they raise your risk and liability. So I put together a couple of examples, and we're going to throw this open to everybody here. Here's the old paradigm. Let's just use this is just a sample, right? So here's a $4,000 chiropractic only bill. In today's environment, that is only going to settle for maybe $6,000. And if you're on a 100% lien and there's no PIP or no med pay, and you're waiting to get your $4,000 in 12 or 18 months, well, I hate to tell you, but the patient needs to get something and the attorney needs to get something, and you're without doing anything else. So you're not making any co-management, you're not doing any imaging, you're not finding objective findings or medical evidence that can be linked back to the injury or the accident. You're building in your own reduction. And I like to call it either change or you're working for change, because your 4,000 is now a 50% reduction. Here's a new paradigm, which is actually not that new, but it may be new to you. This has been actually the case for many, many, many years. That same $4,000 bill, but now we have some imaging, and it could be an MRI, it could again, just a round number of $1,500, and then some medical specials of $7,000. Now, when you bring in medical with the software, it expands the settlement. It's not limited. And you might be able to get, as just an example, and there's a lot of variables here with each case, but say all of those medical bills can now get a potentially $25,000 settlement. Well, now you have a bigger pie, and you're able to get the patient more, the attorney more, and the providers have access more. You may also include UIM. Who's happier now? Well, first of all, the patient, who's probably the most important component of this. The patient's happier because they got the care that they needed. Yes, they got your care, but they also got other care for their injuries. The attorney is happy. They got a little bit more. They made their client happy. And the providers are happy because it's a bigger pie and they're able to get more on their bill. Now, is there potentially a reduction in there? Maybe, who knows? Every case is different. But imagine that $4,000 bill on a $100,000 case. Well, you're not going to be asked for a reduction, and everybody's a lot happier. This is what attorneys need in order to settle cases for fair value, at least giving them a shot. And that's what makes you marketable. Better care plus better equals better outcomes. And that's the new paradigm. So I want you to start thinking about that. I'm just going to throw that out to Dr. Anthony and Dr. Servam and see if you have anything to add to that. And then Jenny, got some questions coming in. If you can just kind of read those out and to who that goes to, that would be great. We're just going to open up all the mics and see if anybody has anything to add.
I don't, but I mean, you're 100% right. A chiro bill alone for our chiro friends, especially with no imaging, is, no matter how good you think your care is and how happy the patient was, it's not going to get you referrals. I mean, that's just the bottom line. 100% agree with you.
Yeah. So again, for some of you that are new to this space or maybe wondering like, why am I, again, the same thing. Where's my marketability? Why am I, I get this all the time as well from providers. I used to get a lot of PI referrals, but I don't get them as much anymore. Well, PI changes and you haven't kept up and or changed. And so now the attorneys that maybe we're sending to you are sending to others that are keeping up and actually staying ahead of personal injury. So that's another area that and listen, people are still getting into accidents. People are still going to get health care at chiropractors and other providers. The question you have to ask yourself, why aren't they coming to me? Why am I not getting these cases? Because in your area, you see it every day, there are accidents. So Jenny, we do have some questions. So if you want to just read them and just.
Okay. Absolutely. Yep. So this first one is directed to Dr. Peary here. What do attorneys think when you sell your lien or LOP to National Health Finance?
I think, to be honest, depending on the attorney, I think funding companies in general have grown and become so kind of involved in the personal injury marketplace, it's not a surprise any longer. I think the big thing for the attorney is simply at the end of the case, they don't want to deal with anyone that's going to dig their heels in the sand and push back. And so I think our reputation, NHF, is very good in that department. So generally, always favorable.
Great. Well, this one also is in line with the attorney question as well. For you, Dr. Patel, does compliant clients work with attorneys in accepting reductions?
Oh, absolutely. You can't be in this business and not expect to get a reduction request. I would like to think the overwhelming majority of my cases we've definitely reduced on. So absolutely. We're not, just like Dr. Peary said, you have to be willing to lessen your grasp of whatever's in that cookie jar, because there's a lot of hands in that cookie jar. There's the attorney's hand, there's all the healthcare providers' hand, the other vendors' hands, and we all need to play in the same sandbox. So yes, absolutely. I don't need to win on every case. My relationship with my healthcare providers and my relationship with my personal injury attorneys, and me being able to sleep with both eyes closed at night, knowing that I helped someone out that really needed it, that's more important to me than trying to maximize the outcome of every single case.
Awesome. This one here is for Dr. Peary. When using a funding company, how fast do you typically get paid?
Generally that depends on how good your information gathering is. So I think part of the help that National Health Finance or any funding company in general will bring to you is, if you're new to PI, gathering the information that is required to get you paid. So the faster you get the information, the faster you're going to get paid, generally within 30 days.
Okay. And Dr. Patel, how would I enroll a client for transportation or pharmacy coverage? This is a question that came through.
Great. So if you're a healthcare provider, you can either pick up the phone and just call us, right? Because you're not the one actually enrolling the client. Either you can go to our website and then you click on the healthcare provider section at the top. There'll be a form at the bottom. Either you can fill that out or you can email us and call us. And once we know who the patient is, where they need to go, and who the law firm is, our case managers take care of the rest. If you're a law firm, it's very simple. Just go to our website, click on enroll new client, fill out the form. We'll get you approved within 5 to 15 minutes, and your client will be taken care of immediately.
All right. I've got a couple more questions here. Dr. Peary, what information do you require to get a case funded?
Generally, you require the attorney name, a brief description of the accident, and policies, preferably on both sides. So meaning that the at fault and your own policy to determine how much money is available in the case.
Okay. And I think you had a slide earlier, Dr. Patel, but this one as well has come through. What areas do you offer transportation and pharmacy coverage in?
Absolutely. So we are in all 50 states. We actually had a couple of last week Canadian law firms reach out to us. I would love to help our neighbors north of the border, but fortunately we don't work over there. But if you're in the United States of America, we can help you out.
Wonderful. Dr. Tauber, those are the questions that have come through thus far. So thank you. I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate that. All right, so if you have any questions for us over at AIPIP, we're going to go ahead and take those offline. You can email us at info@aipip.com or feel free to call us at the number that you see there. I want to thank our guests today for this great presentation and their knowledge and expertise, and thank you for listening and being part of today's webinar. Obviously, if you have questions for the NHF or compliant clients, please reach out to them. But understand the case management, understand everything that we talked about today. I hope that we hit on all points, such as how to improve your PI marketability through case management decisions while improving patient care and case outcomes. I think we did. I think we were right on target with everything. So thank you so much. Make it a great day, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you again on another webinar presentation. Take care. Bye-bye.